All right, so I want to show you a little demo on memory training. Now, first of all, some context. Training the visual memory is really important for the representational painter, whether or not you are an impressionist painter and you paint strictly from life, or you are an imaginative painter and you paint out of your head. This is a very important tool. And I'll tell you why. Okay, so there are a couple of reasons. So, first of all, for the impressionist painter, the memory tends to focus on the overarching concepts, the main ideas, what's most important, and that's because the memory only has a certain amount of bandwidth, so it's going to latch on to what's most important. Secondly, for the impressionist painter, when you go to paint something, you first of all look at nature, you look at what you're about to paint, and then you take your eyes off of that for a second so that you can go walk up to your canvas and then paint the thing. There's not a lot of time that elapses in that moment, but it's enough time that you have to keep things in your head. So you want to be able to retain what you saw as you go to paint it so that you can paint it well. And again, it's not a lot of time, but you still need to build your visual memory to be able to do that effectively. So that's for the impressionist painter. Now, for the imaginative painter, those same ideas apply, but it's also hugely beneficial for the imaginative painter to be storing up visual data in his memory so that he can make a convincing picture. So, for instance, it benefits him to be able to know what a leg looks like, to be able to know what fingers look like. That requires the visual memory. And those are things, but it's also helpful to know how perspective works or how the sky looks when it's bright out versus when it's cloudy out and so forth. Like just any kind of visual data stored in his mind is going to be helpful in making a convincing picture. That's the context. That's why this is important. Now let me show you how to train your visual memory. And this is an exercise that I learned from my teacher. So what I have here is I have an image of a cast. I took this in my studio and I made it black and white. So you can find an image like this online. You just want to make sure that it's black and white, and you want to make sure that the contour is clearly silhouetted against the background. You don't want there to be too much lostness. You just want to be able to see things very clearly. And you might find like an image of a figure as well. That's totally fine, as long as it's silhouetted clearly. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at the image. You're going to let your eyes kind of make their way around the contour until you get to the end, to the other side, to where you started. And then you're going to cover up the image and try to draw it on the right. Now I have these crosshairs here to act as a sort of scaffold. They help to orient yourself when you are going to draw from memory. That's the basic concept. Some kind of like pieces of advice here. I don't spend more than a couple minutes looking. I find that if I look for longer than that, I get distracted or I get exhausted or I just lose information. So I keep my looks to a few minutes, like no more than 5 minutes, ideally 2 minutes. And sometimes as I'm making my way around, I will close my eyes and check to see if the image is there. And if it is there, then I'll continue. If it's not there, I'll go back and look at whatever segment I was just looking at. So once you've made your way around, again, it's helpful to just like cover the image with something so you don't cheat. But then you'll go to draw from memory on the blank crosshairs. So you will, yeah, you will draw whatever you can remember. And I am cheating right now. I did not try to memorize this, so I'm just cheating. But yeah, you'll do your best to memorize what you can. Now, if you don't remember something, if you're missing it in your mind's eye, it's not a good idea to make it up out of your head. You don't want to undermine this exercise by doing that. It will not benefit you in the long run. So it's better just to leave that segment blank and to continue on. So let's say if I forgot what that bottom right portion looks like, I'm just going to pick up right here from the bottom, make my way back around. Maybe I forgot that part of the chest, and I'll go up to the shoulder and then go back up to the head. And that might be my first try. Okay, I have segments missing, but that's okay. I drew what I remembered. And the next time I do this, I'm going to fill in those memory gaps. So the second time I draw this figure, it might be better. It might be more accurate, and maybe I remembered that bottom part a little bit better. This is kind of a bad example. I'm rushing through this, and yeah. So you do want this to look as accurate as possible. Okay. So you'll get better each time you do this. And personally, I have found that I can't do more than one attempt in a sitting. It becomes too exhausting. It sounds silly, but for me, that was the case. I encourage you to explore this, to explore what works for you and what doesn't work for you. Maybe you can do multiple attempts in one sitting, and that's great. Just be honest with yourself and learn what strategies work best for you in retaining the visual information. Now, sort of a long-term goal here, let's say, do this at least 5 times a week. You want to have a pretty good routine, at least 5 times a week. Each sitting for me was like 20 minutes, maybe. I would look at the image for a couple of minutes and then I would go to draw, and the drawing part would be maybe 10 minutes or something like that. Um, 5 times a week, you'll start to notice benefits early on, I would say. And I would say after 3 months, you'll really start to notice benefits of this. Keep up the routine, stay persistent. That's the only way this is going to work out. Now, let me show you some examples. I'll go back down to that. But this is what it might look like. Okay, I don't have the reference image here. I had it off to the side, but I had drawn the crosshairs on paper, and then I had recreated the crosshairs on this blank piece of paper. And so here was my first attempt. You can see some areas that I was missing, and this is actually a very good attempt for me. To have made it almost all the way around on my first try is really good for me. You can see my second try was better. Still, I actually forgot this bottom left portion, it looks like, from try 1 to try 2. That happens. On my third try, though, I got all the way around. And you can see that I make notes to myself about what's working and what's not working. On my fourth try, I made it all the way around again. I was able to add in some values. So the more you do this, the more you can start to see and remember, and you can get into values and eventually colors. Fifth try, sixth try, seventh try, eighth try. Gets gradually better each time. I would usually swap out for a new image after about 8 to 10 tries. So that would be like every 2 weeks, I would switch to a new image. Because after 8 to 10 tries, I noticed that I wasn't really improving the memory. So I would switch out the image for a new one. At a certain point, like after a month or a couple months, I would think, I mean, what happened to me was I got really excited about this process because I realized it opened up a whole world of possibilities for painting. It allowed me to paint way better. It also allowed me to make paintings from memory. So here's an example, and this is just a study, a small study on like maybe like a 5x5 or 4x4. And what this was I was running one day and I just saw a very beautiful little image in on the countryside in the evening when the sun was setting, casting these beautiful lights over the grass and what was corn that had been harvested. And I stopped on my run and spent maybe 10, 15 seconds looking at it and tried to capture it in my mind. And then I went on with my run. And as I was running, I just continually went back in my mind to see if that image was still there. And it was. And then I got home and, before bed, I checked my mind to see if it was still there. And it was. And then the next day in the studio, I went to paint this study and everything was still there. And you'll find that for particularly beautiful sights, it's going to stick in your mind. There's just something that strikes you about it and it stays there in your mind. And so you can keep it there for a day or 2 days and then go back to paint it. And that's kind of cool. And so it sticks this visual information in your mind that's just very, very useful. And here's another example. This is some farmland with a barn, and this was an evening. I think this was in the fall. And the sky was just this incredible color, just incredibly rich from this orange up to this green. It really stuck with me. So I was driving, I saw this, and I pulled over. I looked for about 2 minutes, captured it in my mind. I went home. The next day I came to the studio and I painted this on an 8x10 canvas panel. This particular image was so strong in my mind and it was so beautiful to me that I took this study and I blew it up into a painting. And this is the final painting. This painting is kind of experimental in my brushstrokes and how I went about it, but I was able to make a finished painting just from that 2-minute memory. So it's kind of cool. It opens up all of these possibilities. And it also, again, for the reasons that I said, helps you to become a better painter. So I strongly encourage you incorporate this into your training, into your studies, into your process, and be persistent with it. It's going to pay off. So thanks for watching. I hope that's helpful. I hope that provides you with an exercise that you can do to help you become a better painter. So thank you very much and God bless.